My sister waited until everyone was seated at Christmas dinner before she lifted her Prosecco, smiled across the table, and said, "So, Mia, how does it feel to be 35 and still single? That must get lonely." The laughter started with my uncle and moved around the table. My cousin covered her mouth. My father kept carving the turkey. Renata leaned back, pleased with herself. But I was watching my mother. For 1 second, I believed she would tell Renata to stop. Instead, Mom laughed and said, "She's only joking. Don't be so sensitive." I held my wine glass for one more breath, then lowered it carefully onto the table. The base touched the wood with a soft click. I looked at my sister and told her she didn't need to worry about me because I had been married for 3 years. They thought that was the shock. It wasn't. The real shock came when I finally said my husband's name and watched every trace of amusement disappear from my mother's face. I'm Mia Bennett, and I was 35 that Christmas. In my family, Renata had always been the entertaining one, which meant she could say something cruel, smile afterward, and convince everyone the problem was my reaction. I was the dependable daughter. I remembered birthdays, picked up prescriptions, brought extra food, and answered when someone needed help. I believed that if I stayed calm and useful, my family would eventually treat me with the same care I gave them. Renata knew I hated scenes, and Mom knew it too. That made me the safest person to embarrass because they were certain I would swallow it to keep Christmas peaceful. What none of them understood was that I had already built a life they knew nothing about, with a man from the one family my parents blamed for nearly every problem in my father's construction business. The pattern had been there for years. When I was 29, Renata announced my promotion at dinner before I could, then added, "At least one Bennett daughter is married to her career." Everyone laughed, and Mom called it a compliment. A year later, Renata seated me at the children's end of her anniversary dinner because the couples filled the real seats. When I objected, Mom whispered that I shouldn't ruin Renata's night. Then came the comments about whether I had given up on dating, the photos of men Mom sent me, and the questions about why I worked so much. If I attended alone, they pitied me. If I skipped a gathering, Renata called me bitter. I kept showing up because my 8-year-old nephew, Caleb, adored me, because some relatives were kind when Renata wasn't performing, and because part of me still wanted my mother to choose me once when the joke went too far. Nearly 4 years before that Christmas, I met Julian at a small birthday dinner hosted by a mutual friend. He didn't lead with his last name, and I didn't ask what his family owned. We talked about bad restaurant music, unread books, and the pressure of being the person everyone assumed would always be fine. He listened in a way my family never did. By the time I learned he was Julian Ashworth, I already knew he was patient, private, and kind. The Ashworth name meant little to me then, because my father's contract dispute had not happened yet. 10 months after we met, Julian and I married in a quiet ceremony with 12 guests. I wore a simple cream dress, and we had dinner afterward in the back room of a small restaurant. No announcement, no social media post, no Bennett relative. At first, I told myself I was waiting for the right time. Then my father came home furious one evening and made the Ashworth name impossible to bring into our family without turning my marriage into a weapon. Dad's construction company had won a subcontract connected to a large Ashworth development project. He bid aggressively because he wanted the job, but the numbers left almost no room for rising material costs, overtime, or delays. When the schedule slipped and expenses climbed, he asked the Ashworth company to increase the price after the agreement was signed. They refused and reassigned part of the work. Dad called it betrayal and told everyone the Ashworths had crushed a smaller company. At the time, I still helped him organize paperwork when his office manager was overwhelmed, so I saw the estimates, the signed bid, and the emails. I checked the figures because I wanted him to be right. He wasn't. The labor hours were too low, the material allowance was outdated, and 2 warnings from his estimator had been ignored. The contract did not destroy his business, but the losses exposed problems already building. When I tried to say that, Dad snapped, "You don't understand how men like that operate." Mom told me not to question him. After that, the Ashworths became the family enemy, and my marriage became the one peaceful thing I refused to place in their hands. Julian knew why I stayed quiet. He never liked the secrecy, but he understood it was protection, not shame. We built a calm life in a townhouse 20 minutes from my parents. We cooked late dinners, argued about whose turn it was to buy coffee, and spent Sunday mornings walking without checking our phones. He met the friends I trusted, but not my family. Each holiday, he asked whether I wanted him beside me. Each time, I said not yet. That Christmas, he offered again. I told him I wanted to try one more dinner alone because I was tired of feeling pushed out of my own place at the table. Before I left, Julian kissed my forehead and said, "You don't have to earn kindness from people who should already know how to give it." I carried those words with me while Mom arranged the red tablecloth, Dad sharpened the carving knife, and Caleb built a tower from dinner rolls. Renata had been drinking Prosecco since before the turkey came out. At first, her comments were easy to ignore. She asked whether I had brought a mystery guest, and joked that my Christmas gift to myself was probably another houseplant. Then, while Dad carved the turkey and Mom served mashed potatoes, Renata tapped her glass and announced a toast. She congratulated our cousin on her engagement, praised Caleb for doing well at school, then turned to me. "And to Mia," she said, "for proving a woman can reach 35, stay completely single, and still show up to Christmas like she isn't terrified." A few people laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Renata pushed harder. "Seriously, doesn't it get lonely? No husband, no children, just work and all those quiet evenings?" I looked at my mother. She could have changed the subject or told Renata that humiliation was not a toast. Instead, she smiled and said, "She's only joking. Don't be so sensitive." The sentence hurt because it was familiar. It meant Renata's comfort mattered, the table's comfort mattered, and mine never would. So I put down my glass. I didn't raise my voice. "You don't need to worry about my evenings," I said. "I've been married for 3 years." Renata blinked, then laughed once, sharply, but nobody joined her. Mom stared at me. Dad stopped carving with the knife still against the turkey. My aunt whispered, "Married." And Caleb looked up from his plate. I nodded. Renata leaned forward. "That's not funny." I told her I wasn't joking. Mom's first response wasn't happiness, it was accusation. "How could you do that without telling us?" 3 minutes earlier, she had helped turn my private life into a family joke. Now she was offended that I had kept it private. Renata demanded to know who he was. Dad put down the knife and told me to answer my mother. I let the silence sit. For once, nobody could rush me into making them comfortable. Then I said, "His name is Julian." Renata rolled her eyes. "Julian who?" I looked at my father. "Julian Ashworth." Mom's fingers tightened around her napkin. Dad's chair scraped backward. Renata's confidence vanished. My father asked me to repeat the name, though he had heard it. Then the questions came all at once. Was Julian part of that Ashworth family? Did he know who my father was? Had I met him because of the contract? Was this revenge? I answered calmly. Yes, he was part of the family. Yes, he knew who Dad was. No, I had met him months before the dispute. No, our marriage was not revenge. Dad accused me of choosing his enemy. I told him Julian had never treated him as one. "They nearly ruined me," Dad said. I shook my head. "You submitted a bid that could not support the work. Your estimator warned you twice. When costs rose, you expected the signed contract to be rewritten. They refused. That was painful, but it wasn't sabotage." He demanded to know how I could know. I reminded him that I had organized the project file when his office fell behind. I had read the agreement, the estimator's notes, and the email chain. I hadn't stolen anything. He had handed me the folder himself. Renata tried to pull the attention back toward me. "So you lied to us for 3 years? You let us think you were alone." I looked at her and realized she still believed the worst thing at the table was that I had a life beyond her reach. "I didn't lie every time you mocked me," I said. "I chose not to give you more information to use. Mom said family was supposed to share important things. That was when the truth I had avoided finally came out." I didn't hide my marriage because I was ashamed of my husband. I hid it because I knew what this family does to anything I love. Renata turns private things into entertainment. Dad turns disagreement into disloyalty. And you tell me to accept it so dinner can stay pleasant. Mom opened her mouth, but I continued. You keep asking why I didn't trust you with Julian. Tonight is the answer. You watched your daughter humiliate me, and instead of protecting me, you told me my pain was inconvenient. My aunt lowered her eyes. My cousin stopped pretending to eat. No one laughed. Dad told me I owed the family an apology. Renata said Julian's family had probably encouraged me to cut them off. I told her Julian had done the opposite. He had asked whether I wanted to invite them into our life. I was the one who said no because I knew an invitation would become an interrogation and a marriage would become another contest. Mom asked whether Julian was outside. I said he was at home, waiting for me. Then I stood, thanked her for dinner, and picked up my coat. Mom said we could not leave things like this. I looked at her and said, "You left things like this years ago. I'm just not pretending anymore." Renata muttered that I was being dramatic. I paused beside her chair. You announced to a table full of relatives that my life was empty. I corrected you. The fact that the truth embarrassed you is not my fault. Then I kissed Caleb on the head, told my aunt good night, and walked out before anyone could turn my boundary into another debate. Julian was in the kitchen when I got home, heating soup because he knew I rarely ate much at family dinners. He took one look at me and switched off the stove. I told him everything, including the way my mother's expression changed when I said his last name. He didn't celebrate or say he had warned me. He held me while the anger drained away and the sadness underneath it finally had room to surface. Over the next few days, my phone filled with messages. Dad insisted I had betrayed him. Renata accused me of staging the reveal to humiliate her. Mom kept saying we needed to talk, but her first messages focused more on what the relatives thought than on what she had done. I sent one response. I would speak to them when they were ready to discuss the insults, the excuses, and the pressure to protect Renata from consequences. Until then, I needed distance. My aunt apologized for laughing. My cousin admitted she had noticed the pattern but had been afraid to challenge it. Dad never accepted the truth about the contract. Renata never apologized. Mom eventually wrote, "I should have defended you." It was honest, but one honest sentence was not the same as repair. The following Christmas, Julian and I hosted dinner for the 12 people who had stood beside us at our wedding, plus my aunt, my cousin, and Caleb. There was no dramatic reconciliation. My mother and I had begun talking again in short, careful conversations, with boundaries she did not always like. My father and Renata were still angry that I would not return to the old version of peace, the one that required me to stay quiet while they laughed. I missed them sometimes. That was the hardest truth. Walking away from disrespect does not erase love, history, or the wish that people might become who you needed them to be. But missing someone is not the same as giving them permission to hurt you again. For years, I thought my silence kept the family together. It only kept me available as the easiest target. Putting down that glass did not destroy my family. It ended the lie that their comfort mattered more than my dignity. Sometimes the strongest revenge is not ruining the people who hurt you. It is protecting the life they never earned the right to touch. Would you have revealed the marriage at the table, or left without telling them anything?